Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Gameweek 35 transfer plans. Now, I think the subject of transfer plans is unfortunately one where a lot of people just want to get a general gist of where to direct their team for Gameweek 35. But I think at the start of the video, it's incredibly important just to point out actually the tweet of Ben Krellin's, because the gist of the tweet is what we need to just take away from it, right? The idea that we have now 3 potential doubles, I would say, for Gameweek 36. But they could also be 3 blanks. And actually, my understanding of fixture scheduling, just following the predictors and what they've said all season long, is really we shouldn't actually have a huge amount of blanks. I think at best we might have 1 blank in Gameweek 36. And the way it's set out right now is Tottenham have requested for the Aston Villa game in Gameweek 37 to be sort of rescheduled. It seems like Aston Villa have firmly rejected this request. So I think the indication just from what we've seen in the league so far is that shouldn't be a double, and that should stay in Gameweek 37, even if it can just sort of, be maintained within its current date. As far as some of the other fixtures for, let's say, Gameweek 36, right? So we have Crystal Palace and City, of course. Congratulations to any fans of those teams to reaching the FA Cup finals. That match will once again be in Wembley, but that is unlikely to create a double in Gameweek 36 because both of the teams who play on that week and also their opponents, so Crystal Palace, for example, and Bournemouth, are not involved within any European competition. So there really is no sort of reason, for example, like in the Aston Villa Tottenham situation, to create a double Gameweek 36. Those games can simply be rescheduled into 37. So those are my immediate thoughts. I think that it's actually very unlikely at this point in time that we have doubles, but as Ben Krellin rightly pointed out, the Premier League will give us information clearly before the Gameweek 35 deadline, so that we can kind of make our moves now. And many people don't have their free hits left. I know some people are on the free hit 36 strategy. We'll talk about free hit 34 in a moment, but that's the crucial point here, right? Don't make transfers until we get this sort of fixture scheduling information. I think about ideas, think about what you might do if you have sort of various amounts of news coming out. But as I said, the general indication is we probably won't have a large amount of doubles, potentially just 1. And actually, in my opinion, very unlikely that we actually get any doubles, unfortunately, just due to the way things have panned out with the FA Cup semi-finals. So after that sort of small little tirade, I'd just like to congratulate Free at 34. I think you can probably say the strategy has been an absolute success. Every Free at 34 pick is on double digits, has scored points, has scored vastly more points than some of the other sort of picks that a lot of people would have kept or ignored. And, that goes to some of the picks that I actually own right now in my team. And look, I do own Evan Nilsson. So I changed my transfer plans and I shared that with Twitter before the deadline. I decided to go Ryan Aït-Nouri and Evan Nilsson over Danny Welbeck and Semenyo because I just wasn't sure about Welbeck's minutes really up until the end of the season. Now, as I say this, of course, Evan Nilsson is currently with a red card, expected to be suspended for 3 games. So, of course, am I sure that he's going to be playing football? Have I invested into another Brazilian striker who's got a red card in back-to-back games in terms of the impact of my team going forwards and how I need to manage transfers? Yes, potentially. That is the case. But yeah, I wanted Evan Nilsson for Gameweek 38 versus Leicester. We'll see whether I keep him. We'll see whether that red card gets appealed. I think it's clear that he slipped, but you could call it reckless. I think just based on the precedent earlier this season where Bruno, for example, got a red card and that was rescinded, I would hope that this is the same exact situation with Evan Nilsson and his red card could get rescinded. Not because I'm an Evan Nilsson owner, well, really, because I am an Evan Nilsson owner, but because I just think based on that Bruno precedent that it's a fair judgment to sort of come towards. Losing I kept the assist, right? I just got the red card. Didn't feel so great, but it is what it is. Happy to have brought in Aït-Nouri. I think when I look at the actual team, I suppose Aït-Nouri did outscore Semenyo and Evan Nilsson matched Welbeck. So really, I guess the difference in question is going to be whether I need to actually use another free transfer, potentially, of course, a -4 for Evan Nilsson later down the line. And as I said, it might be the case that I actually keep someone like Evan Nilsson for Gameweek 38 versus Leicester because that's an amazing game and you'd always want to keep those sort of opportunities in hand. Otherwise, I've got Nico Williams and Mbeumo to play. So whilst I have a gigantic red arrow and I've got 62 points and I'm dropped back to 183,000 in the world and free hit 34 has become a tremendous success, there's still, I think, a good opportunity for me to resuscitate the team a little bit, maybe get back with hopefully a clean in Nico's direction or something from Mbeumo in a way of a whole to actually close the game week on a little bit of a higher note. Last season, I actually had a 450% red on Gameweek 34 when I didn't free hit then. This season, not so bad. So I have to say that's a small little positive. But does it feel bad after 33 not getting many gains there, getting, I would say, the right picks on the double with good minutes and not actually getting a huge edge versus this week where, of course, the sort of edge picks that are, I think, 3 at 34 quite specific, like Cunha, Sa, Ait Nouri. Double Chelsea defense, I think, is fair. I probably enjoyed the best sort of Newcastle triple up as much as possible. Of course, it's not Dan Burn, but I don't think anyone was really going there. So I think felt good to get away from that. I think Bournemouth probably a lower end of the sort of outcome of things. SGPN, Brighton are pretty bad, so no thoughts on that. Probably sad that I actually picked a defense that somehow conceded to Leicester 2 weeks back, despite Leicester not being able to score versus any other team in the league. And that's it, really. I think nice to have the Salah captaincy, but it's one of those game weeks where, yeah, I'm missing out on a lot of hauls, things like Sessegnon, Luis Diaz, etc. And you just have to take it on the chin sometimes. So fair play to everyone who used the free hit 34. I hope you guys had a wonderful free hit 34 journey and have enjoyed your massive green arrows. But moving on to the rest of the transfer plans, I think the key thing that I'd like to say right now is the kind of general transfer that I'd be thinking of making for most teams would be the idea of going to Mbeumo, which I already did with my transfer this week, or moving into, let's say, an Everton defender, because Everton actually have some really great fixtures to close out the season. So when I think about it, I think O'Brien is actually a really good pick, for example. Maybe if I could spell it properly. But yeah, O'Brien, for example, has amazing fixtures. You've got Ipswich, Southampton at home. Those 2 games paper out a lot of the cracks for a lot of our teams going forward. So I think that's something to sort of point in mind. Other than that, I think, when I look at my team, for example, I've already set up my kind of rolling team. Evan Nilsson's probably suspended, so, we can forget about him. But in theory, I could roll the team. But I think the transfer of Estupiñán to O'Brien actually is quite tempting in this situation. So it's something that I would firmly consider for my own team. I clearly don't have any additional transfers compared to other people, and we might find out based on sort of FA Cup, not FA Cup related news, but actually fixture schedule news that maybe I don't go for that O'Brien move, and actually it's going to be a little bit more of an aggressive move. I think the alternative transfer for me as well is simply to roll, because when I look at the team, I don't think Nico Williams versus Crystal Palace away is that bad. Yes, of course, I have some attackers versus defenders in ways of, let's say, Nico Williams versus Eze, for example, and of course Henderson versus Eze. But it's a bit of a toss-up. Maybe I could actually just go Pope again, because I'm not actually pitting off a Brighton attacker versus someone like my double Newcastle defense. So actually that's something that I've been considering. So that's something I will think about. In terms of captaincy, I actually think it's probably between Marmoush and Mbeumo, and maybe even someone like Eze, because when I look at the matchups here, I don't really like a Salah captaincy. Definitely don't like a Palmer captaincy. And Isak, Brighton have been pretty poor, but it's not like he's been extremely exhilarating as of late. So a couple of things that are quite tempting in my mind. And it's probably that bottom right corner of the screen, really, but when it comes to captaincy. And I think this could be quite a big swing type of game week where that could sort of play a huge role. So that's something on my mind. But yeah, I'll probably make the sort of Pope move here, because I just like the idea of actually backing against Brighton, as I don't have a forward within the Brighton team, and I could probably benefit within such a situation. So that's kind of where I'm at with the team. As I said, though, I do really like the idea of bringing in O'Brien, and that could just be an opportunity to bench Williams, and then actually maybe I feel a little bit more confident, I suppose, about being Palace heavy, and we'll see. Nico Williams is someone that's really good still in Gaming 36, so keeping him makes a lot of sense for my own team, regardless of whether we have doubles or not. At the same time, Estupiñán, he's probably served his purpose. The only game that he's really relevant in is Game Week 36, so I think he can definitely be sold. And we didn't just get to tap in with a Leicester at home game, very much like Ait Nouri was able to do so this week in free at 34 for a lot of people. So that's kind of where my immediate thoughts are for transfers. I think one thing I'd also mention is if we do get doubles once again for Game Week 36, a lot of people need to consider, if you're already highly invested into doublers, I think the big issue is that on Game Week 37, you're now dealing with a situation where you also will have a lot of blankers. So for example, if you have way too many Bournemouth and City players and way too many, let's say, Palace and Wolves players, which I think is super unlikely, you must have wildcard on 34 to actually have lots of Wolves players, for example, And a lot of the Wolves players that people have bought recently have only been non-free at transfers. So you probably have either Palace or Wolves players and you're on one side of the coin. But it's, I think, quite likely that some people do have a mix of Bournemouth and City. And so in that case, you might be already quite invested into those teams. We saw a little bit more rotation within the FA Cup for Man City once again, with Rico Lewis, for example, starting, KDB on the bench. So I think there's clearly a lack of understanding, maybe on my part, on what the best triple up for City is. So I think it's another situation where this week, even though City have such a great game in Gameweek 35, and it might make a lot of sense to actually move into City picks, it's also very tough to actually justify or actually kind of answer the question of what are the best City picks to go for at this moment in time. So I find that quite curious. But yeah, that's really it in terms of my transfer plan ideas for this week. Let's just actually jump into what it would look like going forwards, assuming that there's actually no doubles, because I actually think that that's probably the most likely outcome right now. So we're back here with the Fantasy Football Hub My Team Pick and Rating tool for Gameweek 35. As I mentioned previously, you can find the tool in the link in the description below. It's a very useful tool to just sort of average out the game weeks and make sure that you don't really have any huge cracks when it comes to setting up transfers. You also get recommended transfers as well. If you feel like you need to make transfers on a specific week and get rid of certain, maybe bad eggs within your team. If I just optimize the team briefly though, it's not cognizant, I suppose, of the Evan Nilsson injury. I think Kluivert's X-Men probably will shoot up a little bit as well. Which is why I'm totally comfortable playing Kluivert over Evan Nilsson. I think part of the reason why I sold Saliba towards Ryan Aït-Nouri was because I was just looking at this Arsenal team and probably also reacting to the Palace game sort of in my head, internal monologue of do Arsenal even really care about these games? Are they not just going to massively rotate in Gameweek 35? Hence, why do I even care about owning Saliba on Gameweek 35, where, I can just get some of the immediate upside of Aït-Nouri once again tapping into Leicester at home, and this time it worked out, fortunately. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I think, as I said, there's an opportunity to go O'Brien here, and I really like it because the AI sort of already recommended the same transfer. Kiwior is interesting, but I just don't think I can be there. I just think Arsenal aren't a team that I really want to be invested into with all those poor games. The only good game for Arsenal is on Gameweek 38, and so be it. I can make hits on that week. It's the final game of the season. We can maximize our transfers if we really need to then, but in the run up to that, some really, really good Everton games. And so I'd rather take the opportunity to go O'Brien here. And that allows me to bench Nico Williams, which I think, puts my team in a good spot. Captaincy wise, I'm surprised the numbers are so strong on Salah and Palmer, to be honest. I actually think, as I said, I'm really stuck between Mbeumo and Marmoush. Maybe I'm overreacting to some of the recent hauls of Mbeumo, even Eze in the FA Cup. Marmoush has been pretty quiet, to be fair, but he did get one assist right within the FA Cup, but he's been sort of playing in this interior left-hand role. He's a winger now within the system, not really a center forward, and that does change from game to game potentially, right, on the personnel available. But I still think the quality of the fixture is really good. I still actually think, in my heart of hearts, that he's a City penalty taker, so I quite like this O'Brien move, and I quite like captaining Marmoush, as I mentioned. So in game week 36, I mean, look, there's a lot of conjecture here, but there's not going to be a Nottingham Forest double. We know that. There's not going to be an Aston Villa double. We know that too. So I think there's really no need to invest. Well, actually, let's find out, because Tottenham, as I said, have requested sort of a reschedulement of the game. Aston Villa have written to the Premier League sort of rejecting that. I think the Premier League will actually reject that. I think that game will stay in 37. So that's my intuition. Now, I've missed the boat on Cunha. Cunha will actually have a chance of doubling. Depending on, what's going on with Evan Nilsson, it might be the case that he's suspended for all these matches, and I might have to find some sort of transfer plan towards Cunha. At which point, of course, I probably should scale back the O'Brien move and not take such an aggressive approach on that game week, and instead look for a way towards getting towards Cunha here in game week 36. So this is what I'm trying to say, where, if I think about, let's say, going for O'Brien, and I let's say, think about this as one of my transfer plans. If I was trying to reset this, for example, I'm just quickly refreshing the page here, so it just shows you how easy it is to sort of work through plans. But if I was to roll this week, where I think I really just do have a reasonable team, and I go towards game week 36, I've got a lot of opportunities to sort of move in and out of players here, where simply Eze's probably going to double. I'm maybe also in search of another Crystal Palace player within the team, but I also need to be, wary that I can't go too hard on these players, because also, if let's say we talk about blankers, just looking at my team right now, take a step further, Pope will definitely play on game week 37, so that's not a problem, even though it's Arsenal. But that, for example, someone like Guardiola, if I'm assuming all doubles for, let's say, the FA Cup semi-finalists that have become finalists, so Guardiola will blank, Marmoush will blank, Eze will blank, Evan Nilsson will blank, Clivert will blank. So that's already almost, when I look at the team here and just sort of think about the optimization of things, I can play Trippier, that's fine. So that's a back three. Nuri actually won't play either, so I've actually only got still a back three, because of course I would have in theory brought in O'Brien or not, and still have Estupiñán and Trippier. So that's 3 defenders, 3 midfielders, and only 1 striker. So that's a pretty tricky situation, and I think that shows you the power of what happens if a potential double was to be created, or a double-double. But I think, it seems very unlikely that that's going to be the case now. Whether we invest heavily into 36 is just going to be depending on those announcements. And right now, it doesn't seem like 36 is going to be an extreme possibility. So I'm not going to be even that invested into going towards someone like Cunha on 36, because I actually have a lot of doublers within my team, including Aït-Nouri as well, who now is a potential doubler. And I don't really want to come out at 36 with more 3 transfers being used towards doublers, and then having to sort of take constant hits on 37 here, where, I just don't really have a functional team. I've got effectively a 3-3-1, and I need a couple other transfers as well. So that's one thing I wanted to mention, basically, where I think actually a lot of our teams are well set. So much investment has been put into Triple Palace, Triple City. Once you already have these kind of bedrock pieces within the team, there's really no need to be more invested going forwards. And so I think people might just want to be aware that they can just scale back their transfers. But that's it, right? If you have the free hit, of course, feel free to go full steam ahead with, let's say, ignoring maybe some of the doublers and then actually investing into a lot of the 37 players, or doing the exact opposite. Maybe free at 37 makes a bit more sense now. Invest more into the doublers, ignore some of the 37 players. What I think is interesting is actually, because Bournemouth have this fixture in Gameweek 38, a lot of people have recently been investing into Bournemouth, like myself, knowing that even if you don't care so much about 37, actually 38 is the big game for a lot of these Bournemouth players, and that's sort of a huge pro. So you could also flip that approach, as I said, and just free at 37. And that's kind of like the big dilemma. Whereas obviously if you own, let's say, City, I guess for 38 isn't a particularly good fixture. So you can also think about how City on 36 is maybe one of the last junctures where you own City, and you're happily disposing them on Gameweek 37. So something to just point out at this moment in time. As I said, inverse relationship, I think, with City and Bournemouth when it comes to Gameweek 38. When it comes to Gameweek 38, for example, for Wolves, it's actually really good. When I look at Crystal Palace as well, it's absolutely awful. So interestingly, of course, you can sell the 2 FA Cup finalist teams, and I don't think you'll be hurt very much when it comes to 38 and planning for 37. But it'll definitely probably hurt a little bit if you start selling some of the Bournemouth and those kind of Wolves players. So just a point to mention within the transfer plans, not a wider point. I think I'll probably be actually making a team selection with a little bit more detail in terms of, my reaction to chip strategy and any sort of chip news we get. As I mentioned, that Ben Crillin tweet is absolutely essential in terms of news. I hope you guys have a better game week than myself. Take care, goodbye, or at least up until the Thursday games, right? So enjoy the football with the Champions League. I'm going to be waiting for that to finish, hopefully, before I make some of my cheat sheet updates, because I do think that so many people do own someone like Xhaka, a lot of Arsenal players, and so it's sort of worth iterating whether we should all be sort of selling our Arsenal players, and maybe even some of our Newcastle players as well. Like, Isak is now a big cash cow. Newcastle don't have the most exquisite of games to close off the season, but it's also very evident that a team like Newcastle are trying to get top 5, and it's beneficial for them to also finish the season on a high, whereas maybe Liverpool are technically now, as of this game week, on the beach. A team like Chelsea technically aren't on the beach, but they play like they're on the beach, and Palmer certainly has been on the beach for 3 months, and I do keep him in my team somehow. But that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys soon. Take care, and goodbye.